Hey guys, and welcome back to Eurospec Garage. My name's Alex, and today we're tackling a big problem. So, as you guys have seen, we put together the Tiguan. It got back from the body shop, and the engine is in, the car runs and drives, but we have one major issue, and that issue is that the Tiguan does not know how fast it's moving. There's no display readout on the speedometer. If I'm going 10 miles an hour, it shows 0. If I'm going 50 miles an hour, it shows 0. So the car has no idea what's going on. And as a result, I have the airbag light warning, I have the brake light warning, I have just everything going on with the car. So it's freaking out. It's really not happy with what is going on. And so I've managed to narrow it down to a couple of issues. Number one, and really the only issue, is that both front wheel speed sensors are not reading correct values. And so I was like, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? And essentially, the way I knew this is, first of all, when scanning the car with VCDS, the codes would show both front wheel speed sensors are malfunctioning or mechanical failure or something like that. So, okay, that is bad. Maybe I need some new sensors. So I got some new sensors. I installed them, relatively easy to do. I'll show you guys how to do that. And drove the car again, same issue happens. So I went into VCDS and I opened up the advanced measuring values for the ABS control module and selected the two front wheel speed sensors for speed and for air gap. And again, one of them would show absolutely zeros across the board. Doesn't matter how fast the car is moving, how fast the wheels are turning. The other would show erratic values. It might show the correct speed for 0.5 of a second and then 0. Correct speed, 0.5 a second, 0. And so erratic behavior. So I'm like, what the heck is going on? So replace the sensors. That didn't fix the issue. Then I decided, okay, well maybe that part of the car was not damaged, but maybe something happened. So I whipped out the continuity tester on my multimeter and check the wiring from the sensor to the ABS module in the car. All the wires are good to go. Everything is communicating. I thought maybe the ABS sensor or the ABS module itself is bad. But again, that wouldn't make sense because the only error it throws is for the two front wheel speed sensors. So something else is going on. So if you guys have ever had this issue, ABS warning, a bunch of different things, commonly what you got to do is replace the speed sensor. But I found out today that that is not always the case. And let me show you guys what I am talking about. So if you take a look right here, you can see I have removed the wheel bearing and hub assembly from the car. I've removed the axle and removed the wheel bearing assembly. So, tell me what difference do you see? This is the one that came out of the car, and this is the one that is brand new, that I picked up from the dealership. So, what is the issue? So guys, as you can see, this is the original wheel bearing out of the car, right over there, and this is the brand new one. And so let's talk a little bit about how the car knows the wheel speed at each particular wheel. And so let me pick up a wheel speed sensor. Here is one. This one, I don't remember which side it's from. They are different, but essentially this is it. And it's a little magnetic pickup, that little port that you see right over there. So essentially, the way it lives is just about like this. And so obviously this one is fixed to the car. So the way that this works is this is the ABS sensor, and it is fixed to the car, and essentially it lives right alongside this wheel bearing. And as the wheel bearing spins with the wheel turning, you can see right over here you have these magnetic lines, kind of. And so the sensor is looking for those magnetic signals, and each time one of these passes, it knows the distance between these magnetic strips, and as a result, it can calculate how fast that bearing is spinning, therefore sending it into the car for reporting the speed. And so if you take a look at this one, clearly most of that rubber material is missing, especially if you compare it to this one. So this is the brand new one. You can see that this rubber ring is intact, whereas on that one it is missing. And so I talked to the dealership. I was like, is this a common issue? Because I've never seen this before. And they said, yes, they in fact disintegrate. So if you buy this from the dealership, they told me 12,000 miles or a year's worth of warranty on this for this particular issue. The bearing itself is good. It's not wobbling or anything like that. It's just that disintegrated, and so the car does not know how fast it's moving. And that's the whole issue, because everything else in the car is perfectly good. So I went out and I bought 2 new wheel bearings to replace both of the front wheel bearings. And so what I'm going to do right now is, I already have this one apart. I'm going to clean up everything around there, install the new wheel bearing, and then move on to the other side and install that one. So again, guys, this is something I had no idea could go wrong, but apparently it can. And I wanted to share it with you guys because apparently these things just disintegrate and you can no longer pick up speed. No amount of sensor changing is going to fix that. So you're going to have to go in and replace the wheel bearing hub assembly. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you up and I'm going to show you exactly how to take off the wheel bearing and how to put it on. It's not that difficult. You do need a jack. You do need some special tools, but it is absolutely doable. So I'll show you a quick way on how to do it. It doesn't take very long, so stick around. And yeah, just for reference, this is what the ABS sensor looks like. So let's get to it and see if this works. Alright, so next we're going to have to remove this bolt, and I'm going to have to figure out how to hold the brakes. There we go. Just open it just a little bit. And now it's time to remove the 21 millimeter bolts on the very back for the carrier, the brake carrier. There's one right there and one down there. So let me plop the guys up. All right. So you should be able to see this one over here and that one up there. The 21 mil bolt. And we're gonna use our long crowbar to pop these guys off. And just like that, it's free. These are quite heavy, and so I'm gonna wrap this bungee around the string, just like so, and lift up the caliper and hook it on just like that. You want to be careful not to damage the brake line. So now it's time to remove the brake disc, and we have a little securing bolt here that holds the brake disc on. And I'm being very lucky right now because usually these guys get fused on and it becomes very challenging to remove them. But luckily the brake disc came off nicely. So now that we have that, it's time to remove the brake shield. And again, there's 3 T30 bolts. And so we're just gonna pop them off. Like that, it's out. And now we can get to the wheel speed sensor, which is right here. You can actually get to it with just the wheel off. You just have to reach back behind here. But to show you guys how it's done and also to help remove the wheel bearing, I had to take the brake shield off, but it is possible, relatively easy to remove these guys with the wheels off. And so once again, there are T30s, or just one T30. So if you can see that. And it just pulls right out, just like that. And then classic Volkswagen and Audi clip. Just like that. And there we have the ABS speed sensor. And we want to take it out of the way because we don't want to damage it while we're removing the wheel bearing. So we're just looking at the wheel bearing. The wheel bearing itself is fine, but that material on the inside, as I showed you guys in the beginning, that is disintegrated, which is the reason why the car can't see how fast it's going. So now it is time to undo the bottom control arm. That'll allow this hub assembly to move out. At that point, we'll remove the axle bolt and push the axle back and get it out of this place. Then after that, we have 3 bolts to remove the wheel bearing and hub assembly. And then basically that's it. We're gonna put the new one on. We're gonna give it a clean before we put it back in. And then reinstall everything in reverse order. So let's get to it. The bottom 3 bolts are 16 millimeters. And we want to be careful here so we can move this lower control arm out of the way. But before we can do that, I want to remove this bolt and push the axle in its home so that we have as much room as possible and as little problems as possible. So as you can see here, I'm pushing this bolt in and it's pushing the axle in. And so I'm going to unscrew it and push it out as much as it'll go. Just like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the lower control arm and push the hub out of the way just like that. Got to be careful with the brake caliper. just like that, the bolt is out. And now we just pushed the axle out of the way. And I'm putting the bolt back into the axle because the axle is full of fluid. So we don't want to lose all of that fluid. And just give me a second, I'll show you guys what we're working with. If you guys can see on the back side here, we have the axle removed. It is in its place. The control arm is out of the way, and now we have access. You can see back here, there's one, there's another one down there, some triple square bolts. And we are going to crack them loose. And you need a M112 size for this. I'm going to start with this top one up here. Make sure that it's square onto that bolt because it's going to be mighty awkward if you strip it, and that would be a challenge in itself. So I'm taking a little extension and positioning it over, making sure that it's secure. And just like that, that one is out. Next we're going to move on to this one. And guys, it is recommended that these bolts are replaced. But I don't have replacements, and I think we're going to be okay. Now we can do the rest with the small ratchet. We are ready to move on to pull the wheel bearing. Alright guys, so normally I wouldn't be beating on it if I were planning to reuse this, although I don't really know of any instance in which you would want to remove this and then put it back. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hammer and just tap on the inside out. Tap it on all sides. It should come out. Typically I wouldn't recommend doing that if you want to reuse it, but I'm going to do it here. The other option you could do is you could thread the bolts back in from the back side and tap on the bolts and the bearing should come out. But in this case, this is what I'm going to do. So and one thing that you're looking for, if you can see this, I just tapped it just a little bit. Just take a look at the crack forming right here. So this is the bearing separating from the housing. So that is what you want to do. And so we're just going to tap it and have it come out. Boom. And just like that, it is out. So let's take a look at the back here. Oh yeah, you can tell that that ring right there is completely disintegrated. It's not even there anymore. And I think chunks of it are left right in here. And so, yeah guys, this is a real thing. I'm not sure if this is Mexican built cars, Mexican suppliers for this, but this is not good. This failing and crumbling apart is a huge safety concern, because if the car doesn't know how fast it's going, it's not going to turn on. It's not going to turn on the airbag. It's not going to turn on the ABS or anything like that. So yeah, Volkswagen, I'm not really proud of this. I mean, what's going on here? I'm not sure, like I said, if this is a Mexican built part and the Mexicans use a different material or different supplier for this part, or what's going on, but that's not going to fly. So let's take a look inside here and see what we see. So we can see some crud in there, and what we need to do is we need to clean that out and make sure that the surface is nice and clean. So the way I'm going to do that is with some brake clean. I'm going to spray it all in there, take a little brass brush, clean everything up out of there, and we should be ready for the new one. We cleaned it up real nice. It's as good as it's gonna be, but yeah, everything is smooth and clean, and now we're ready to assemble the new one. So let's go ahead and put it in. If you guys are wondering, the part number is 5QO407621-F. So here it is, the new one. Let's go ahead and slap it in. Make sure that it's nice and clean. And it doesn't matter what orientation you put it in, because it's all the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the bolts in by hand just so that it doesn't fall out. Now we're just going in reverse order, guys. So I'm going to put these in. I'm going to tighten them down with the small ratchet and take out the big cojones. And then put everything back how it was. What's nice about this wheel bearing is the 3 bolts come around the back. They hold the actual hub portion of the bearing on. And then inside that is the bearing that holds this outer plate on. But then the axle, there's also an axle bolt that goes through here, so it sandwiches everything together. That's a nice and safe way in case your bearing does fail, so that your wheel doesn't fall off and things like that. And it's actually held on with bolts and not just necessarily circlips or anything like that. So, let me show you guys up in here. I hope you can see it. You guys can see that there's a bolt right up there, right down here, and right over there. And then if you look, one here, one there, and then one on the other side. So the 3 bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these down, and we'll start putting in the axle and the brakes and everything else. Alright guys, so we have it torqued down. It looks good. Spins nicely. And now it's time to install the ABS sensor. So guys, to install this one, it's really simple. You just slide it in, just like that. And then the bolt that goes onto it is a T30 Torx And it just goes right in there. And you can do this with the wheels on the car. Maybe you can. I'd recommend removing the wheels. But if you're changing the bearing anyway, I'd recommend going this far anyway. And so, as a result, that's it. So I'm going to take my little T30 and tighten it up. It doesn't need to be a lot. It's a relatively small bolt. And so we're just going to snug it up by hand. I'm sure there's a torque spec, but it's a steel bolt going into the aluminum housing here. And then you just take that, clip it in, and boom, that's done. So now what I'm going to do is I could put the brake shield on, or I could tackle the axle. And I think the axle is the next best thing. So I'm going to set you guys up and show you guys how to do this. So if you guys can see, this right here is the bearing. The hole is right through here. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to unscrew this bolt and pull back this whole entire housing and then guide in the axle in there. And the reason I have the bolt in here is because this is where the fluid lives for the axle. And as I take it out, you guys will see that it's going to start leaking. That's normal. And so we're going to unscrew this and do some manhandling and guide the axle back in its home. Just like that. And before you get too far, make sure to stick the bolt in there just so that it doesn't pop out once again. Just like that. We can tighten it just a little bit in order to bring it in all the way. Alright guys, so after a little bit of finagling, you can align these 3 bolts at the bottom of the control arm into their respective holes. And yeah, we should be good. So now it's time to put on the 16 milliliter bolts at the bottom here. And I don't believe these are adjustable, meaning when if you ever remove this, you need to get an alignment. I mean, I would recommend it, but they are not adjustable at all. So this is the only thing that you remove. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. And then we need our 16 millimeter wrench to tighten these up. Just gonna tighten them real good. I'm sure there are specs where you can do your best. If you don't have a torque wrench, well, that seems to not be going anywhere. All right, so now the axle is fully in its home, secured. And now it's time to put on the brake shield, brake heat shield. Just like that. You might have to wiggle the brake carrier just a little bit. But again, to remove this, these are literally the only 2 bolts that I removed, and then the whole brake assembly came off. And I took some bungee cords up at the top to secure it while we were doing this, so it's not too much of an issue. I'm gonna run these in by hand, make sure there's no obstructions, and then torque them down. I'll put the torque specs up once again. So guys, that is a bearing replaced. Don't forget to torque this one down. The way you do it is when the wheel is installed, make sure you don't forget to pull the wheel cap off, install the wheel, torque this one down when the car is on the ground, and you're good to go. So I know you guys know how to do the rest. Put the wheel on, put the wheel on, put the bolts in, drive them in, torque them down, and you are good to go. I hope you guys enjoyed this, but before I wrap up this video, let's go and see whether we fix the problem and whether we have speed on the cluster once again and the car's not freaking out. Alright guys, so we're in the car is on, I cleared the codes, and now it's the moment of truth. So first of all, let's go and pull up our front wheel speed sensors so that we can see them. And the car right now is on all 4 jack stands, so it's completely off the ground. So we'll be able to bench test this in the garage. So go into ABS brakes 03, go into advanced measuring values, and then come over here, and we're gonna find the left front ABS wheel speed sensor, front wheel speed, left front, and then wheel gap direction, and then right front. Okay, so now we have this over here. If you guys can see that. So right now it's 0 kilometers an hour, not a big deal. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it, put it into drive, remove the handbrake, remove the brake, and all of a sudden, let's take a look. We're at 5 miles an hour. Okay. And we're still getting 0 kilometers an hour on the left front wheel. So that's not good. Okay. Let's check the air gap malfunction. Air gap malfunction. Hey! It's working! And it looks like our speedometer is back and working well. Got a couple error lights, but no big deal. Yeah guys, so let me press the brakes and let's watch what happens over here. and we get zeros. So let's put it in park. Handbrake on. Well guys, I think we did it. I think that was the fix, and my hunch was correct. Whatever that little ring is on the bearing itself completely disintegrated. There was nothing for the sensor to see. It was just kind of shooting blanks and looking out into the abyss. And so now that we have this, we tested it, we put the car in drive, and we saw both front wheel speed sensors responding, and most importantly, the car did not freak out, and it showed us the speed on the speedometer, which means that all the other auxiliary systems like the airbag, the fuel level sensor, the anti-collision warning, the ABS system, all of those things are working. So yeah guys, if you have any suspicion, or if you have an ABS light and all of a sudden, if you replace the sensor and there's still no change, double check that bearing, take it out, take a look. You should be able to see it if you remove the axle. Again, I know it's a lot of work, but if you're coming up on an inspection or your car's not showing speed, this is likely the culprit. So I didn't know, but it looks like these things are just disintegrating. So I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys saw that it's really not that difficult to replace a wheel bearing. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I know that you guys are watching and most of you are not subscribed, so please do hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it very much, and it keeps me motivated to keep creating content for you guys. So thanks again guys, have a good night, and I'll catch you on the next one.